Saudi Arabia and the Islamic Republic of Iran have been fighting for supremacy in the Muslim world for over 4 decades. Since Iran's Islamic Revolution in 1979, relations between Riyadh and Tehran have deteriorated dramatically. And despite brief periods of relative calm, the Cold War has devolved into proxy wars in Iraq, Yemen, and Syria in recent years. The Iranian Revolution, the nuclear program, the purported Iranian assassination plot of 2011, and most recently the murder of al-Nimr strained ties between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Background of the Cold War. The Saudi Arabian-Iran proxy war, also known as the Cold War of the Middle East, is a long-running fight between Saudi Arabia and Iran for dominance in Muslim territories and the Middle East. The continuous instability in the Islamic world is attributed largely by Western journalists, pundits, and politicians to one fundamental cause: the sectarian divide between Shiite and Sunni Muslims. That might explain the animosity between Saudi Arabia and Iran, the two regional countries striving for Islamic world leadership. The narrative claims that such a scenario is unavoidable. After all, Shiites and Sunnis have been at loggerheads since the Prophet Muhammad passed away, and his devotees disagreed over who his successor should be. The current battles, which are being labeled the new Middle Eastern Cold War, would only be the latest incarnation of a long-standing rivalry. The two nations have supported opposite sides in adjacent crises to varying levels, such as the civil wars in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, as well as the conflicts in Qatar, Bahrain, Iraq, and Lebanon. In many other regions, including even Nigeria, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and other portions of East and North Africa, Central Asia, South Asia, the Balkans, Southeast Asia, and the Caucasus, it also applies to conflicts or more generalized warfare. In what has been labeled a Cold War, the struggle for regional dominance is fought on a number of fronts for geopolitical, economic, and sectarian prominence. US backing for Saudi Arabia and its backers, in addition to Chinese and Russian support for Iran and its supporters, has attracted comparisons to the Cold War era dynamics. Thus, the proxy war has been described as a front in the so-called New Cold War, according to former Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev. The Sunni-Shia division, as well as the disparate historical background, socioeconomic makeups, and superiority claims of the two countries, are at the core of the protracted Cold War between Riyadh and Tehran. The struggle between Shias and Sunnis is being used by Saudi Arabia to justify its enmity with Iran. However, the clerics in power in Iran contend that while Saudi Arabia's royal government lacks credibility in Islam, the Iranian Republic is based on Islamic principles. An overview of the Cold War's 40-year history. To get a better understanding of why the two are enemies, let's take a look at the last 40 years of history. Iran's Shah was overthrown in 1979 by the Iranian people, and the leader escaped. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini took his place, bringing with him a renewed sense of purpose to consolidate Iran as a superpower in the region via Shia Islam. This caused ripple effects throughout the Sunni Muslim world, particularly Saudi Arabia, which had long regarded itself as the Muslim world's leader. The fact that the country is the custodian of Islam's two holiest shrines, Mecca and Medina, is at the heart of this belief. However, its significance in the region precedes Islam. Mecca was a trading hub and home to religious shrines that were thought to bring great fortune to tourists who visited them before the birth of Islam. As a result of this, it became a bustling city. The city of Mecca thrived with the birth of Islam and the consequent division of the Prophet Muhammad's followers into Sunni and Shia. Saudi Arabia's prominence has grown in recent years as a result of the huge amounts of money created by its oil resources. The fact that the vast majority of Muslim pilgrims visit Saudi Arabia each year adds to the kingdom's importance. The kingdom's identity and policies revolve around its safeguarding of the two sacred locations. Without delving into 1400 years of history, including battles, kingdoms, occupations, science, art, and culture, the ideology is geared at fellow, predominantly Sunni countries such as Turkey, Pakistan, and the Gulf Arab states. A seat at the table. Saudi Arabia, a dynasty and the cradle of Islam, has long seen itself as the Muslim world's leader. The Islamic Revolution in Iran, however, in 1979, spawned a new kind of state in the Middle East, a kind of revolutionary, totalitarian dictatorship, with the stated purpose of exporting this model beyond its own borders. Iran has a significantly different vision of the Muslim world than the rest of the world. Iran is adamant that political tides in the Muslim world must be recognized as drivers of change in a country that has long been manipulated by the United States and other Western countries. A succession of events in the last 15 years has exacerbated the disparities between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Saddam Hussein, a Sunni Arab who was once a major Iranian enemy, was ousted by the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. This effectively removed a strategic military deterrent to Iran. It paved the way for a Shia-led authority to take power in Baghdad, and Iranian dominance in the country has grown steadily since then. In 2011, revolutions erupted across the Arab world, creating political turmoil all through the region. Saudi Arabia and Iran took advantage of the uprising to exert their influence, particularly in Syria, Yemen, and Bahrain, raising mutual tensions even further. Iran's detractors claim the country is attempting to position itself, or its proxies, across the area and gain control of a territorial corridor that runs from Iran to the Mediterranean. So how have things become worse? The military conflict is starting to heat up since Iran is winning the regional conflict in many aspects. In Syria, President Bashar al-Assad's forces have been able to largely beat Saudi-backed rebel groups, thanks to Iranian and Russian help. Saudi Arabia is desperately seeking to restrict expanding Iranian dominance. But Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the nation's de facto ruler, is worsening tensions in the region with his military adventurism. He is fighting the Houthi rebel movement in Yemen, partly to counter suspected Iranian influence abroad. However, after 4 years, it is proven to be an expensive risk, despite many assessments from experts in a UN panel which revealed Tehran had provided tremendous aid to the Houthis in terms of intelligence and munitions. Iran has denied allegations that it is trafficking weapons to the Houthis. Meanwhile, Iran's ally, the Shia militant organization Hezbollah, controls a politically influential bloc and commands a large, heavily armed rebel force in Lebanon. Many analysts argue the Saudis compelled Lebanese Prime Minister Saad Hariri, whom they support, to quit in 2017 because of Hezbollah's role in regional wars. Later, he came back to Lebanon and postponed his resignation. There are also external influences at work. Saudi Arabia has been empowered by Trump administration assistance, while Israel, which views Iran as a deadly threat, is essentially backing the Saudi drive to restrain Iran. The Jewish state is concerned about pro-Iranian fighters advancing closer to its border in Syria. Saudi Arabia and Israel were the countries most adamant in their opposition to the international agreement restricting Iran's nuclear program in 2015, claiming that it did not do well enough to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. So, how will the Saudi-Iranian conflict unfold? In many ways, this is a regional version of the Cold War that pitched the Soviet Union against the United States in a protracted armed standoff for decades. Although Saudi Arabia and Iran are not fighting directly, they are involved in a number of proxy wars, a type of war in which they assist opposing groups and militia groups around the area. Yemen has become one of the battlefields that has exacerbated Saudi-Iranian tensions. Another notable example is Syria, whereas in Yemen, Iran is being accused by Saudi Arabia of providing the rebel Houthi movement with ballistic missiles fired at Saudi Arabia. Iran is equally blamed for exercising its muscles in the Gulf's significant canals, via which Saudi Arabian oil is exported. The United States accuses Iran of being behind recent terrorist attacks on Western tankers in the region, which Iran denies. Are we on the verge of a direct war between Iran and Saudi Arabia? Tehran and Riyadh have been fighting through proxies so far. Although neither side is prepared for a direct war, a serious Houthi strike on the Saudi capital, or, in the most notable case, a critical economic target, may upset the proverbial cart. Attacks against Saudi Arabia's infrastructures by the Houthis have inevitably created a new front to the conflict between Iran and Saudi Arabia, like in the Gulf, where Iran and Saudi Arabia face off with each other across a maritime border. Raising tensions could risk much more comprehensive warfare. So will Saudi Arabia eventually go to war with Iran? Freedom of movement in the Gulf is important for the United States and other Western nations, and any battle aimed at blocking the waterway, which is essential for international trade and oil delivery, could definitely pull in US naval and air troops. Iran has long been viewed as a destabilizing influence in the Middle East by the United States and its allies. The Saudi government increasingly regards Iran as an imminent threat, and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman appears determined to take whatever measures he considers necessary, wherever he believes necessary, to counter Tehran's growing influence. The recent attacks on Saudi Arabia's oil facilities have underlined the country's vulnerability. If war does break out, it will most likely be by chance rather than intent. A continuation of the Cold War. Western powers' tactical assistance to Saudi Arabia, provided their interests align, and Russia's backing for Iran complicates the rivalry even more, although not unconditionally and prone to change depending on Russia's interests. In retrospect, the Cold War between the former Soviet Union and the West was never truly over. It simply relocated from Europe to the Middle East in so many ways. Present frontline governments are headed by religious ideology rather than political views. Iran and Saudi Arabia are wrapped in the righteousness of Islam, but at their core is the raw desire for survival, dominance, and what it means to be a powerful Muslim state, if not the most powerful. So what do you think about the Saudi Arabian and Iran Cold War? Do you think it will eventually erupt into a full-blown war? Please let's hear your opinion in the comment section below.